Cool. I think we're live. Hi, today we have Amaury from Bitcoin ABC, who implemented the protocol that's the leading implementation in Bitcoin Cash. It's caused a lot of controversy in the Bitcoin community. From Bitcoin ABC, who implemented. And yeah, it's caused a lot of discussions and raised a lot of questions, I guess, people that want to know as well. And I guess a lot of the newcomers and people that are recently joined the Bitcoin space are interested to know how this affects the growth and the future of Bitcoin as an overall project and as a technology being used day to day. So I guess the two main solutions that resulted in a fork within Bitcoin and its blockchain where the Segwit implementation and Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin ABC's implementation. And the opposing sides was that, one side wanted to implement Segwit and Lightning Network, which allows you to perform the transactions off-chain. And the other one was increasing the block size. And there's pros and cons for each side. But yeah, thanks, Amaury. I just wanted to have a conversation with you just to start off with, what are the issues with block size? And I guess prior to this chat, we had a conversation about it relating to a bus. If you could just kind of explain that to people so they can understand why this was necessary, please.
Yeah. So I'd start with to say for most of the time in Bitcoin history, the block size was not really an issue because there was simply less demand than required to fill up the block. So this is something that became, very big and very urgent maybe over the past 2 years or so. Before that, that was mostly irrelevant, for user in a practical sense. So what's happening is that the Bitcoin network produces one block on average every 10 minutes. And those blocks contain the transaction that are confirmed on the network every 10 minutes on average. So having a block size limit essentially limits the number of transactions that can be confirmed on the network in a certain amount of time. And so, yeah, some people came up with, I think, an analogy that's pretty good with a bus, right? So let's imagine you have a bus that leaves at the bus station every 10 minutes. And people, they can go in the bus to travel wherever they want to travel. And over time, there is more and more people that want to take the bus, right? So at the beginning, the bus is not full. And for several years, the bus is not full. So more everybody is happy. The bus company is selling more tickets, and the people, they can go wherever they want. So far, so good. But at some point, the bus becomes full. And so what's happening is that the price starts to get higher because there is more people that want to buy a ticket than people that can actually get into the bus. So the price gets higher and higher. And when you are going to be able to actually, get into the bus, it's becoming more and more unpredictable because it depends on, how many people are in line already waiting for the bus. And this is exactly what's happening with Bitcoin transaction today. We see the transaction fee are getting very, very high. And also the transaction time are getting unpredictable, which is also, it's a cost for user, even if it's not a direct monetary cost. Unless you consider your time as no value, then, waiting an unpredictable amount of time as a cost to users. So what would happen in a regular free market is that the price going higher is an incentive for the bus company to buy a new bus and hire a new driver. And know there is more bus going on the road, or maybe they change the bus and they use a bigger bus. They buy an upgraded model where they can fit more people in it. So there are various options, but essentially the higher price would create an incentive for the bus company to increase the amount of people that can get into the bus. And now the bus company can sell more tickets, and there is more people can go into the bus. So it's a win-win situation. But what's happening into Bitcoin right now is that there is this kind of cult that is created around the fact that the bus, or in case of Bitcoin, the block size needs to be 1 megabyte, and it cannot be increased. And so as a result, then you get this situation where fee gets high and confirmation time gets unpredictable. And this is what we are trying to solve essentially with Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I guess I can relate to the bus scenario with some of the festivals you kind of go to where, they run out of buses, so they have to call in private organizations to bring in their buses, kind of help people get to their destination, instead of just kind of allocating more buses, or, you can apply it to many scenarios. But that's a really good analogy to help people understand it. So I guess, yeah, it's a kind of a drawback because, when, there was I think, Block show, Charlie Shrem was on it, and I had a really interesting question for him because, he kind of spoke about Bitcoin as this thing where the fees are understandable that it's so high. And for me, one of the most attractive things about Bitcoin always was the fact that you could send money around for very low cost. And this was, the thing that really brought me into it, because the unbanked could really benefit from this. The unbanked and underserved, whereas the current prices, it could be someone's daily salary they could be putting into a transaction, and that's really, for me, it's a bit heartbreaking because it kind of goes against the principles that made Bitcoin so attractive to me in 2013, and it's one of the main things that really resonated with me. And I brought this up with him, and he said it was never designed for things like micropayments. It was never designed for things like this. And I was quite surprised he made such a bold statement because, in Satoshi's post on Peer-to-Peer Foundation, he said the usual solution for a trusted company with a central database to check double spending. But that just goes back to the trust model. In its centralized model, the company can override the users, and the fees needed to support the company make micropayments impractical. So you can very clearly see the foundation and the ideology that led to the creation of Bitcoin, and it really did strive to be a micropayment system as well as a day-to-day spending system. So I was very surprised at Charlie Shrem's comment and the fact that he kind of neglected the very foundation of what Bitcoin was brought out. So yeah, just on that, like, what do you say to people that kind of say Bitcoin isn't really designed as like a cash payment kind of a system, which your organization and your foundation is trying to push forward that it is?
Well, I mean, the title. There is some. Is that from my side or yours?
I think. Sorry, what was it?
I get some feedback. All right. Yeah, so I think it's very clear. The social contract was peer-to-peer digital cash. This is in the title of the white paper, and this is what most early adopter wanted to get into. And as long as the block size was not a limit, this is more or less what was happening. And since it's happening, there is some scary metrics right now. So 2017 is the first year, for instance, where there is a negative adoption amongst merchants for Bitcoin. So what that means is that this year is the first year ever in Bitcoin history where there is less people that are accepting Bitcoin than there was last year for purchase, which is, I mean, this is a very bad number to look at. I'd say this is a scary number. Also, micropayments. So it depends how you define micropayments, right? Like, so if you define micropayment for value transfer, below 10 cents, maybe Bitcoin is not the ideal stuff. But right now, Bitcoins, on a regular basis, have transaction fee that are above $5. So we're not talking about micropayments here. We are talking about payments. It's impractical for most payments. It's just like practical to replace wire transfer, and that's pretty much it with this kind of fees. So, or maybe Western Union and this kind of stuff, which is still good, but it's not what most people sign into, and it's probably not civilization changing.
Especially with Japan accepting it as legal tender.
Yeah. Also, also there are other cryptocurrency out there, and they can do that better because they have lower fees. So, you know, even though, say you have Western Union, and with Western Union you would pay $20 to do, you know, some transfer, and you can do it for $5 in Bitcoin, but you can do it for, you know, maybe 10 cents with most other cryptos. So what will you use, like the $5 option instead of the $20 option when you have a 10-cent option?
Yeah.
So right now there is a huge, you know, existing ecosystem that is working around Bitcoin, and this whole ecosystem is gonna trailing behind the fundamentals, right? So as the fundamentals change, the ecosystem is gonna take time to adopt. But if Bitcoin doesn't improve its fundamentals, then, you know, this ecosystem is gonna try to move towards something else because it's just more economical.
Fair enough. All right. So I can understand, you know, with the fees, it can make it a bit complicated, and it is a shame that the adoption by stores and other places that want to accept it as a payment, form of payment, has reduced. I mean, that was one of the first things, again, that people praised, that we should get stores to accept it, and the more places you can spend Bitcoin on, the better the whole economy would be, or
Yeah.
Bitcoin. So yeah, it's kind of stepped away from that. So I want to bring it to Luke, one of the core developers, comment, who wants to reduce the size below 1 megabyte. So he wants it less or equal to 300 kilobyte. And his comment on Twitter was 1 megabyte blocks are 52 gigabytes a year, or 35% increase per year. Technological improvements are only 17% per year. In other words, with 1 megabyte blocks, the blockchain will outspace technology, and soonish nobody will be able to use Bitcoin. In my opinion, this is, you know, a bit kind of focused on only one aspect of the entire economy, and it doesn't really take into the exponential, you know, Moore's law of exponential growth of technology either, and capacity being quite affordable nowadays. So do you have any comments in regards to that?
Yeah, I very much agree with you. I think this is a bit short-sighted in the sense that it optimizes one metric. Actually, this is a valid metric to optimize, but Bitcoin is a very complicated system with, you know, very many different people that use it and interact with it. You know, you have users, miners, and merchants, and people that hold, and traders, and whatever. And all those people, they want different stuff, and they react. You know, there are different metrics that are important to them and that are less important to them. But all those actors, they interact with each other and they create the value of the system. So usually, if you can make things better for one of those actors without impacting the other actor too badly, everybody wins. On the other end, if you make things better for one actor by making it worse for what other actor care about, then this is likely a losing proposition even for the specific actor, because you lose, you know, you lose some ecosystem with that. And I think that the mistake that Luke is making here is that he's optimizing one metric, which is often called CONOP, essentially how expensive it is to run a node that validates what goes on the network. And this is a valid measure to take if you think that optimizing this metric is the most important thing to do. And this is going to make running a node, you know, cheaper for people that want to, and everything, and all of that is great. But on the other end, this is going to impact negatively users and miners and you know, various other people in the ecosystem, because it's the system more unreliable and more expensive to use. And so as a result, I don't even think it works as an incentive to run a node, because the incentive, even though the cost goes down, the incentive to run a node also goes down, because now less people are using the system and the system is less interesting. So this is the typical, this is the typical stuff where you optimize a metric, but you impact negatively other actors in the space, and as a result, you end up with a losing proposition.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, you know, from my perspective, I was reading someone's comment on the full nodes, and they said, oh, look, if we increase the block size, I'm not going to be able to afford to keep up with it. So I don't think it's very fair. And I found it really interesting because they saw that, but they don't see, I guess they failed to see oh, hold on, but if we don't do that, we're going to lose users. We're also going to have higher fees, which makes it a lot less attractive for people using the actual currency for payments. And also, you know, for the amount of time it takes for a transaction to go through if they have the lower fees. All of these things, I guess, for me, outweighs the fact that you may have to go and buy a larger hard drive or something like this, or the bandwidth.
Yeah, also consider that if the system grows, the value grows. And so if you are in right now talking about that, you probably have some coins. And the value of your coin is going to increase. So with that increased value, you probably can buy a hard drive or, you know, a more powerful computer. So all of that is like, if you neglect the economic aspect of it, you really don't see that. But if you are here right now and we grow the system and attract more people and stuff, you will have more resources to run your node later when it's more expensive to do so. Because it's more expensive because more people are in, more people are using it. And there is more resources in the system.
Nice. And I guess the other part, in terms of the increase in block size, you know, a few people mention some of the negative aspects apart from the full nodes needing to increase their capacity or the bandwidth involved with keeping up to date. Do you see any issues that need to be addressed? I guess it would have some cons of itself. So, you know, we've gone kind of over the pros and cons of not reducing it. I mean, not increasing it. Are there, you know, does increasing it have its own risks that need to be kind of analyzed and dealt with?
Yeah. So the first, I think probably the most important limiting factor is how fast you can validate a block. Because if the time you require to validate a blocks get anywhere close to 10 minutes, then you're going to see a lot of orphaning creating itself on the network. And so a lot of proof of work is going to be wasted on branch that don't end up being the network. But eventually the network can even become unstable with a lot of reorgs and stuff. But this is a limiting factor, but we are very, very far from that limit, right? Like right now on, you know, powerful servers, you can validate most blocks in less than a second. So we are far from that. And another problem is obviously like how big of a machine you need, especially hard drive and stuff like that. But this is relatively cheap today. And you also have some security, security constraint to take into account. So they are part of the blocks. If you want to validate them, you need the entirety of the block. So one of them is the Merkle root. So the Merkle root is something in the block header that is essentially a print of all the transactions that are in the blocks. And so you need all the transactions that are in the block to recompute this Merkle root and check that it has the right value. And so if you say tomorrow I'm gonna start accepting block up to 1 GB in size, maybe someone can send you a valid block header and then 1 GB worth of transaction that do not fit the Merkle root, that are just made up transactions that are not in that block. And you cannot validate that whatever node send you that is wrong until you get all the transaction, recompute the Merkle root, and see that it's not the right one. So you want the block size to be above the demand for transaction throughput. Maybe 2 times the demand or something like that would be a good number. But you don't want it to be like absolutely high, way above demand, because you open yourself to some attack vectors.
So it's kind of like someone bringing in a lot of paperwork to suddenly have to, unless you've gone through all of it, you can't say whether it's valid or not. And if you
yes,
you can
exactly.
Like 1,000.
That's a very good analogy. And if you do that, and if you allow someone to bring you an unlimited amount of paperwork, then someone can just like use all your time by bringing you like a truck full of paperwork, right?
Yeah, and that wouldn't be very good. So in terms of the transactions per second, so we currently have with the 1 megabyte size, well, theoretically 7, but it's practically about 5, isn't it? Or so they say. And
well, it really depends on the usage pattern of the user, right? So it's difficult to give a specific number without knowing what user are gonna do. But yeah, typically it's gonna be 3 through 7. Like 7 is kind of like the theoretical limit.
Yeah.
But you know, typically you're gonna be below that. But you know, 3 to 5 sounds like a good number, good estimate.
Nice. And with the increase to support up to 8 megabytes. So one thing that I really liked about Bitcoin Cash is that it allows you to choose. So you're not really kind of forced to do 8 megabyte. You can choose anywhere between the 2 up to 8 megabyte, and it has room for growth. So if people don't,
you can actually choose higher than 8 megabyte. 8 megabyte is the default value, but you can choose higher values. We have tested the software with up to 32 megabytes blocks.
So the block size limit has completely been removed, has it?
No, because of this attack vector, like the one you summarize with paperwork, it would be unwise to remove the block size entirely. But ideally, what we would like to do in the future is to have some kind of mechanism that is able to find a suitable block size rather than relying on people setting up some config. But right now, this is what we have.
I get it, because I guess the more hash power, the more people and resources you have, you can increase it, so you can validate those larger numbers, block size at a faster rate. So at its current state, it's between 2 to 8 megabytes, or am I wrong about
that? Right now, the default value is 8 megabyte, and 2 megabyte is the default value for generated blocks.
Okay.
So by default, miner are gonna generate up to 2 megabytes block, but the node are gonna accept up to 8 megabyte blocks. So you can, and it happened already several times in the history of Bitcoin Cash, a miner can decide to change the default config and mine a bigger block, right? So we have a few blocks that are more than 2 megabytes, but by default, it's 2 megabytes for miners.
Nice. And I guess I just want to share. I'll see if it works properly. So I want to do a screen share and want to show. So I want to show this at the moment. I hope you're seeing it correctly.
Yes.
Look. Are you still seeing that? So
yes.
Wanted to kind of compare this with Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin Cash, we saw that, no matter what your transaction fee was, it will get through eventually. And yes. I really love this graph because it really puts everything into perspective. So now if we go back to Bitcoin Core's development, I find that really scary, this pattern, because it shows that if you have minimal fees, there are times that it just doesn't even get through. So you could be waiting, 4 hours or more. And this is after the improvement. Prior to this, there was days, probably
yes.
even where transactions weren't going through if your fees were minimal. It kind of like monopolizing the transaction market to incentivize higher fees. And that for me was kind of a worry. And when I compare it to Bitcoin Cash, I mean, it just looks so much healthier just looking at the graph itself. I know it's quite new, and we have to give it more time. But I thought that was something significant to point out.
Well, and for most of the history of Bitcoin, it looked just the same as Bitcoin Cash looks right now. And this is this is how Bitcoin was running when it was getting a lot of steam and a lot of people were adopting it and everything, right? So I think this is a proven, this is a proven technique. This is a proven mode of operation that have made the success of Bitcoin for several years. So I don't see any reason to bet against that. I think it's very dangerous.
Sure. The other aspect I wanted to go over is the Lightning Network. So it takes some of the transactions off the chain, off the main Bitcoin blockchain, to be precise, just so people know. And it does it on a separate blockchain of its own.
Well, not for your blockchains, but yeah.
Yeah, so payment channels.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. And you know, some people say that this has its own risks because you're kind of privatizing those channels, and it can be attacked. People can go offline and things like that that can affect the payments that are on those channels. So I guess my real question to bring it all together is why do we have such a complicated proposal to do it in that way when we can increase the block size? And you know, it has taken, I've seen, probably about 2 years to come to this solution. You know, why has it caused like that it has taken long? Because it shows it's not very centralized. So in a centralized model, the company or the organization would be like, well, we're increasing the fees, tough luck, this is for the best of the future of the company, it's happening whether you like it or not. And we would go on about that day, whether we liked it or not. But in this case, you know, there's been a lot of discussion, which really shows for the first, well, for me, for the first time, the true power of decentralization on such a large scale, because you know, just because the cause decided on something, this doesn't mean it's going to be that way, or a few influential people say, oh, it should be done this way. It's not necessarily going to take place. So my question is, why has it taken so long in terms of kind of understanding which path is better? And it seems after Bitcoin Cash implementation of the increase in block size, suddenly other people are seeing that like, oh, well, it seems like it's working and maybe we can do it this way, despite everything people had said that it's not going to work.
Well, I was in the Bitcoin space for a very long time, and to me, this block size stuff seemed rather obvious, and you know, it was discussed in the very early days of Bitcoin, and I really did not expect it that it would take 2 years to get there, and we would end up, you know, with a split. Actually got involved, you know, maybe 6 months ago, a bit more now, maybe 9 months ago, about 9 months ago, when I realized that, you know, it was taking years and it wasn't getting, you know, nowhere. So I decided to get more involved at this point in time. Before that, I was, you know, I was there, but I was more looking than being active. I mean, I think really there is a difference of vision, right? Some people they trust more the economics of the system, and they want to onboard as much people as possible to get it as strong as possible. Some other people, they value being able to verify everything on consumer hardware, you know, as something very important. It's very important to them. And if we grow the block size, you know, quite dramatically, maybe not 8 meg, but you know, if we continue to grow it, then they won't be able to do that, and this is a big problem for them. But yeah, at the end, on one case, you build a system for a few people to run on their consumer machine at home, and in the other case, you build a system that's gonna, you know, change the financial system of the world. So to me, there is like no hesitation. You're not building the same thing, and there is one of those two things that is much more interesting to build.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it was supposed to replace, well, it was its intention, and it still is, to replace the current financial system and how things are.
Also, I think there is probably a bit of self-deception that is going on, because even though like Lightning Network is actually some cool technology and it's probably going to work great for some use case, this is also known that Lightning Network is not secure when blocks are full. So there is an attack vector known as, you know, cascade channel closing that you can do when blocks are full, that allow someone to steal money out of the Lightning Network. So it's very bizarre to me, all those two stuff, like increasing the block size and scaling via Lightning Network, has been opposed to each other, when really Lightning Network. So yeah, Lightning Network, you know, you have those transactions that close the channel, where actually, you know, different participants in the channel actually get their money in Bitcoin on the blockchain. And for various reasons, because all the channels, they are based on technology based on time locks. There are time windows during which you need to be able to send some transaction on the blockchain. And if you are somehow, for various reasons, unable to send those transactions in the right time frame, then there is a possibility of theft. And so if you are using such a system when blocks are full and transaction confirmation time are unreliable, then you are exposing yourself to theft, right? And so the idea that we're going to scale everything on Lightning Network magically and not grow the block size seems a bit, it doesn't quite work from a security perspective.
No, so I understand what you mean. I guess, complement, they can't kind of complement each other, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you can do these things on the payment channels, you would have to have more regular timeframes to deal with the transactions and close the transactions.
Yeah, essentially the layer 2 can only be secure if the layer 1 is secure and reliable, because the layer 2 is going to rely on the property of the layer 1. So if the layer 1 becomes unreliable, the layer 2 becomes unreliable.
Yeah, so it's quite surprising that, given this, the solution hasn't approached block size increase. And I guess, I hope personally, we do see it implemented in Bitcoin itself. And it's really nice that Bitcoin Cash exists to really pave the way to kind of show that, look, it is possible, we're doing it, and it hasn't caused any issues. And hopefully in time, people can kind of see that as well. And futuristically, what can people expect from Bitcoin Cash? We have the larger block size and the transaction fees dramatically reduced by the time the difficulty drops down. Do you know when it will drop down to its normal state?
So the difficulty is a bit of a tough question because there is no equilibrium point. Like at any point in time, depending on the relative price and the relative difficulty of Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, one of the two is more profitable than the other, like at any point in time. And if even, by, some cosmic luck, they end up being as profitable as each other, then, a few days later, the price of one has moved differently from the price of the other, and you're back to the situation where one is more profitable than the other. So, so you're gonna see, a part of the hash rate wants their coin to be, relatively stable and provide value to user, because they realize that, if the coin becomes like very fast and then very slow and then very fast and then very slow, this is a problem for users. So overall, this is not a long-term. This is not a good long-term strategy. But some other miner, they more have a short-term perspective, and they're gonna mine whatever is more profitable at any point in time. And those miners, they're gonna cause wide swing of hash rate between one chain and the other. That's that's going to happen no matter what. No, there is some solution to that exists in the altcoin space, because all the altcoins that are using GPU mining, for instance, then a miner that have a ton of GPU can mine any one of those coins, right? So they have been facing the same problem for a long time, and there are some solutions that come from this space. I've done some work, and I would have something ready if people want to adopt it. But actually, so far, I've not seen a lot of traction for this proposal. Like some people yell very loudly about this, but most of the important actors in the space, they don't think that it's a very important, very urgent problem to solve. So
yeah, it's a bit strange.
Yeah.
All right. So in terms of going forward, will there be, I guess as technology advances, we have the capacity to store more data and bandwidth becomes more easily distributed and allocated. Do we have more block size increases in the future? And is this something that your team and you yourself have thought about implementing? And does it require another hard?
We want to make sure. We want to make sure, and the other people that work on other software on Bitcoin Cash is very aligned on that point with what ABC wants to do. We want to make sure that in the way before we actually reach a state where there is a lot of 8 megabyte blocks that are produced, we have a more long-term solution, something that maybe is going to compute the next block size limit based on information on the previous blocks, or I don't have like a very specific proposal to give to you. There have been a lot of different ones that have been made over the time, so we're probably gonna have to choose one or make up a new one. But for sure, we want to have one before 8 megabytes become a common occurrence.
Yeah, and we end up in the same in the same predicament. I guess one thing that comes to my mind is how the difficulty is adjusted based on the number of miners that are on the network. So something similar would probably be a good idea. So depending on the block size is variable dependent on how much transactions need to go through and how many people are on the network. So yeah, we'll be excited to see what other solutions come about. And I guess that's really good information, I guess, for people to understand what's going on from perspective of Bitcoin Cash. There's a lot of negative news, I guess, put onto it. And I can understand, I guess, the same thing happened with Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. People dedicate themselves sometimes blindly to a kind of an organization. It could be like following a sports team that you just don't want to accept some things that are, happening. And it kind of... get you a bit of a tainted view of what's really going on.
I see a fair amount of that on both sides, actually. There is a lot of there is a lot of sometimes it looks like people cheering for sports team, but I don't think this is very I don't think this is very good, right? Like, this doesn't foster a good good path forward. But this is pretty much, this is what the situation has turned into. So we got to deal with it now.
Yeah, it's just kind of embedded in society, I guess. People kind of bring it over to other parts of the world as well. But at the end of the day, this is a technology. There's no home team kind of a thing to support. It's just you have to understand.
Yeah, you would expect that you could measure. You could measure stuff and see, oh, this stuff is better than the other, right? Like, I made an experiment and I have the numbers. You would expect that most decision would be taken like that, but it's very much not what's happening right now.
That's a shame.
And
I guess
that very clearly with what we discussed before with the block size on Lightning Network. You see that Lightning Network more or less require a block size increase to work reliably, and actually it makes a lot of sense to do both. But somehow the old stuff kind of split with people, opposing the Lightning Network and the block size increase in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's quite interesting, right? Because even though if you look at the very original presentation of Lightning Network, it was made by notably several people, but notably Joseph Poon had a presentation there where he explained that essentially, if we want to onboard the whole world onto Bitcoin, using Lightning Network reduced the need for a block size for around gigabyte size to several hundreds megabytes, right? Which is good. This is very good to take, but it was very clear. It was very clear even at the time that you would need both if you want to onboard the world on the system.
Yeah, and I hope in time people can come on to understand that. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't have both and kind of use what's best for everyone rather than if you do Segwit, it means no increase in block size. If we do increase in block size, it means no.
Sometimes you don't care about a feature, but someone else care about it, and those people, they're gonna come and use the system. And it grows the whole ecosystem. So even though you don't care directly about the feature, this grow the ecosystem you are using. It make it more solid, and it brings more resources in it to improve it and everything, right? So at the end, you still win. When something is introduced that you don't directly care about, there are higher order effect that makes you care about it. If someone else care about it, then you should probably do it.
Nice. Just a offside kind of a discussion. What do you think of rootstock and how that would affect the kind of current issues with block size and transaction times?
I think it's very orthogonal to the block size problem. So rootstock is a technology that allows to do smart contracts on the Bitcoin blockchain. or on the Bitcoin Cash, actually. Both of them would work. And it seems that there is a lot of people out there that are interested about smart contract. I honestly, myself, I'm not sure what to make of it. I think it's probably, one of those stuff that some people say nah, and some people say it's gonna change the world, and it's probably gonna end up somewhere in between. Or this is the gut feeling I have. This is very, cutting edge technology, so it's very hard to foresee what it's gonna do. But this is the thing. Like myself, I don't use smart contract that much, but I know that some people care very much about smart contracts. So I would welcome Rootstock to use the Bitcoin Cash blockchain, because I think all Bitcoin Cash users should also welcome company like Rootstock to do their stuff on Bitcoin Cash, because even if they don't care themselves, then it grows the ecosystem, it grows the value, and some people do care about that. It's important to some people, so why not do it?
Yeah, it's what you mentioned before. Just because a couple of people don't agree with it doesn't mean we shouldn't have the space to kind of accommodate for those needs.
Yeah.
But it's great. Really appreciate speaking with you and kind of being able to have a discussion about Bitcoin Cash. For me personally, as I said, the most attractive things about Bitcoin that got me into it in 2013 was the transaction fees and being able to kind of accommodate for the unbanked and underserved people globally who don't have access to traditional systems, and also being able to compete with Visa, MasterCard, and Western Union, MoneyGram, and these other centralized organizations that transmit money. So for me, it's really, really important to keep the transaction fees low, and being able to put more transactions in a block also means that as a miner, if you find a block, you kind of incentivized through it anyways. So you don't really need to increase the fees at a dramatic level. And I hope we reach that equilibrium that you said, where the miners are happy, the users are happy, and that.
Yeah, I think a point about that a lot of people are missing is that miner can make money by having a few high fee transactions, but also they can make the same amount of money by having a ton of low fee transaction, right? It's not like people seems to have in their mind that it's the interest of miner to have fee as high as possible, but it's only in their interest if not too much people are leaving the system, right? If there is a lot of people that are leaving the system because of high fee, then it's very not in the miner's interest to do it. And yeah, I think this was a important stuff to add, because a lot of people seems to have misconceptions about it.
For sure, and I would rather something that's more affordable by a greater number of people.
Yeah.
And it evolved based on those parameters, rather than being able to be affordable by a select number of people. And I think as a system that's already competing with the global financial system, I would rather again have a system that can compete and do it fairly and do it in a way where it's open to the greater number of people. But yeah, thank you so much for joining the conversation with BitTopia and myself. Hopefully we can catch up in the future when you do the next implementation. But it's been great, and I hope people can learn from this and kind of spread some light into the darkness that's been created by discussions. And I hope people kind of let go of what they favor based on personal selection and really understand the technology a bit better, and understand that these things are necessary for the growth of the entire ecosystem. And it's not so much about, oh, I'm a Bitcoin supporter, I will never support Bitcoin Cash. And it should never be about that. It should be about what is the most viable solution, as you have said as well. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. Hope people see this. Cheers.
Ciao.